In the rainy seasons, overflows its banks to the distance of more than 4 miles.
All right, this is super interesting because she is reading an old Bible from the mid to early 1800s. And it says the Jordan River um, has muddy water, but if you take water out and put it in a jar, it becomes sweet. I don't know much about that. But then the next thing it says is that it overflows its banks by a distance of 4 miles. So that's the part I'm going to talk about. I pulled up a bunch of reference material to show you guys, but I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to explain to you what I'm seeing. First of all, the Jordan River in over there is not that big and does not flood that much. You can go look it up for yourself. This is the Jordan River in Utah. It does flood that much, and it does have a floodplain of in excess of 4 miles. Now, technically, the Jordan River starts up here on the north side of Utah Lake and runs into the Great Salt Lake. However, my research has led me to believe that this is actually part of the Jordan River too, the upper Jordan or upstream of Utah Lake. There is still a river right there where that blue line is. It's called a stream now because it's much smaller. But they built a big reservoir upstream of it to control the water flow because it floods right here where my head is. This is a big floodplain. So this area is called Goshen Bay, and it still floods today. You can see it's got a lot of crops because it's very wet, marshy land. When the water runs off from the mountains in flood season in the spring and in the fall probably as well, this floods. This area, probably in here somewhere actually, is where the Israelites crossed the Jordan River. And it was flooded then, and that's why they couldn't cross it, and they had to have help from God to part the water so they could cross. Now, downstream of Utah Lake is also a huge floodplain. This actually flooded in 1983-84. They had to like sandbag it and everything. So this is also a big floodplain. Now what's interesting about this is if the snow is melting and running off of the mountains, the water levels of the lake are rising, the river is flooding, then what's going to happen is it's going to get backed up because up here where my head is, sorry, it's a terrible picture, but hopefully you get the idea. See where it says Mountains of Megiddo? This is what we call Traveler's Pass in the Bible. This was called Traveler's Pass. Today it's called the Jordan Narrows. And this is where the Jordan has to go between two narrow mountain passes. So the water would back up and flood all of this. There's also other areas further downstream towards the Salt Lake that would have big floodplains too. Now, you had to remember that the water of the Jordan River today is highly controlled because this is a very populated area. So I already showed you the reservoir they built, but there's also at least 2 dams and multiple like gateways or water, I forget the word for it, but like gates that control the water flow, multiple canals, irrigation canals, and just redirecting canals. They direct the river 2 different directions. There's also pumps. One of the largest water pumps at the time was put in on the Jordan River in the 1800s, right after the Mormon settlers arrived. There was all sorts of drama and politics surrounding that. But so my point is, this water flow is highly manipulated and highly controlled because of how populated it is. But if it were to be, back in the day, this would all flood on a seasonal basis. But as you can see, the floodplain here is easily 4 miles. Actually, it's 6 miles in some parts. And there is documentation about the flooding here and everything. So anyway, I thought it was interesting. It definitely fits the description of the footnotes given in that old Bible. I'm not sure that a Bible from the 1800s would necessarily be describing what I consider the real Holy Land or Promised Land, but maybe it was because it does fit. So maybe whoever was in charge was, referencing the correct area. Anyway, let me know if you guys have any questions about that. I just thought it was cool, so I wanted to share.